So there's nothing on the 16th now. There's no other meeting. Okay. Got it.
So now that we're recording, we're signing. So we still have 4 more minutes before we'll start. So you are on your way to hopefully finding that the council might be flexible on another day.
Well, what we found so far is that Michael, Pastor, Steve, you and I can all make the 24th. So we're on our way.
Okay.
And
Now you gotta get a quorum.
Okay, not quite a quorum, but it's on the way. Yeah, that's pretty close.
What it is for Jane and Chris, the meeting on the 16th was not working for us of October when we were presented. So we're trying to get ahead of the calendar to see if we can find a slot for us all to be there. So that'll be good. So I thought before we officially start, am I calling on Steve when it's time for the right? All right. So I thought yesterday's teamwork was outstanding. Chris, I could just tell you were wishing you were part. Yes, I could watch you in your seat going like, I could have done that. But did any anecdotal conversations go on that were interesting? When I was starting to take pictures, I could watch people put their hand down in case they thought I was figuring it out. So they were trying to hide, but any anecdotal stories to share?
Kind of felt, well, they were trying to help me, but the time come out. Because if they're hiding from themselves, I mean, they're not helping themselves. No, everybody's pretty good.
I actually enjoyed the enthusiasm and the number of people who brought their responses up to me before I even got out of the sanctuary. I mean,
Wait a second, let me just check. It's because they use the sermon time or they use. What's going on? Just so
We both gave them a good opportunity to do just that.
I was gonna say, they weren't gonna do it when I said it. So this might be a good time. That's what they were. The great thing though is that the young family who has the 2 little kids who always come up in children's sermons. I don't know the name, but he said to me, he said, when you look at these, you will immediately recognize that who filled out one of them, which was, I'm sure, his daughter.
Yes.
And I thought that was really key. That even
She wanted one.
wanted filled it up.
It said everyone.
It said everyone.
Said everyone, and it'll be interesting if Lad captures her thought.
And that the parents empowered her to do it.
Yeah.
You know, pretty cool.
Everyone means everyone. Hello, Lad. Can you
Hello.
hear us here? I want to make sure you can hear us, okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Perfect.
boy, you've had too much coffee this week.
No, just the right amount.
Excited about compiling the 39 responses that he had received yesterday. Lad, Steve has just a little anecdote to share with you about one of the responses.
Oh, yes, Lad. One of the responses, when I was picking up or receiving them walking out of the sanctuary, the young couple whose children always go up for the children's sermons, so
Yeah.
you know who they are. He said to me, he said, when you look at these, you'll immediately recognize who filled out one, meaning that his youngest daughter did. And so if you get one and it looks, should I say elementary, it was done with all of the best intentions and motivations. So
It might be quite insightful
Yeah.
to hear from.
Exactly. It could just totally change our whole viewpoint on technology.
she may be able to answer those questions better than adults.
Yeah.
I bet it's heavy on the tablet. So
You know, since they started, and just the little girl, she is growing up. She's wearing clothes that all of a sudden I'm going, whoa, wait a minute, what?
And they're coming into membership.
Yeah.
Berkmeyers. I think I'm pronouncing that.
I'm gonna call time and say hello to Marge. Marge,
Morning.
good morning. And we're now going to turn it over to Steve Gunderson for our opening prayer devotion.
Good morning, and we tried to do unique stories, Pastor, so this is continuing a tradition that Chris and I have set up for all these mornings. As some of you know, I spent 16 years in the U.S. Congress, Western Wisconsin, and I had a district that had more dairy cows than people, and I always said, never got a nasty letter from dairy cows. That was a good thing. But you imagine that church dinners, breakfast, lunches were a little bit different. And I found a wonderful story I wanted to share with you, because there was one of these small church country breakfasts where the pastor asked a farmer in bib overalls to give grace before the breakfast. And the farmer stood up and he goes, Lord, I hate buttermilk. And the pastor kind of looked at him going, where's this going? And the farmer continued, and he says, Lord, I hate lard. Now the pastor was growing concerned that this guy was losing it. But without a beat, the farmer continued. Then he said, Lord, you know, I really don't care for raw white flour either. At which point the pastor didn't know if he should intervene or what is going on. But the farmer said, but Lord, when you mix them all together and bake them, I love the warm, fresh biscuits they make. So Lord, when things come up that we don't like, when life gets hard, when we don't understand what you're saying to us, help us to just relax and wait until you're done with your mixing. It will probably be even better than the biscuits. Amen. That was his morning prayer. And it's great wisdom for all of us when we get with complicated situations like the world we live in today. I had a pastor once who said, trust God and leave the rest to him. But this is also especially appropriate for, I think, our task force at this point in time, because now we have all this information coming in and we have to somehow find order and recommendations out of the chaos. So with that as background, let us pray. Lord, you are the master creator. We begin this morning with a special request. Please create strength and peace among all those impacted by the attacks of September 11th. Remember those who lost their life in this tragedy, 2,750 in New York's towers, 184 at the Pentagon, the 40 in Pennsylvania's field, and the 400 police and firemen who lost their lives trying to save others. Help us heal our nation and our world. But this morning, we also ask that you might extend this wisdom and vision of the farmer with the bib overalls to all of us. Help us to take all the information we have gathered and blend it into new vision, recommendations, and even new action that enable our church to better serve those we know and, yes, those we hope to know in the future. Amen.
Amen. You're going to send it over. Thank you very much.
We have to turn them in.
Oh, do your work.
All right. Sandy and Michael, thank you for joining us. Doing a sound check. Can you hear us? Marge, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Yep.
Sandy,
Yes.
you're good? All right, great. All right, well, we gathered, we got a superb attendance this morning. And we gathered and did celebrate and thank those who helped yesterday with the acquiring of an additional 39 surveys that Ladd has stepped up. He is going to be the capturer of that, and then that will blend in with the electronic surveys that Mike and Sandy will be working on analyzing. So we should be with an abundance of opinions coming out of there. So bravo to everybody for not only yesterday, but your work in between what's going on. So thank you all very much. Any additional comments on the gathering of surveys? And it's Sandy.
We're just for the sake of the group, everybody's hard work. I think we hit 100 surveys.
Oh, awesome.
I think so. Based on what I knew was in the office, what I've seen online and what Ladd has, I think we might be right at 100.
And it's pretty darn impressive from a statistical point of view. So bravo, and a lot for us to, again, as Steve cautioned us, to digest and figure out what to do with. Okay. Any other comments on the survey before we get into the let's get ready, because we want to present some hearty and thoughtful recommendations to the church council. All right, for those of us who may not have been early for the pre-chat, the October 16th date that we are aiming for with the church council is going to, a request is in to move that, because apparently Pastor Michael, Steve, and Deborah will not be, and Ernie will not be available on October 16th. So we are hoping that the date of October 24 will work out. Ernie's seeing if he can get a quorum for that. So we have a baby bit of grace, but I also think we've got more than enough work to keep us busy in preparation for that. Any questions or comment on the moving the 16th to the 24th? Any issues with that, Steve?
I just want to encourage anybody and everybody who can join us in that day to be there, because just the presence of the entire task force, the personalities, the people, I think by itself gives credibility to our record.
So to that point, could someone refresh my brain on what time it will be on the 24th if it works?
Yeah, we'll aim for scheduling the meeting from 10 to 12. And I would look to set up the agenda to have this be first, so that the guests are, welcome to stay after their portion of the meeting, but they're also free to leave if they'd like to.
So could I ask just a preliminary on this? Who would be available on the 24th to be in person for that? Could I see a hand? Okay, all right. Chris is breathing. You're not sure?
Well, I know that's my mother's 91st.
Oh.
I will be in Wisconsin.
We're on Zoom.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. So,
And that's at 9 o'clock Wisconsin time, so I'm quite sure I can do.
okay. And so up on the screen, Marge, Sandy, Mike, and Lad, are you in person, or who's in person? Lad's in person.
I think I'm back by then. You said it's 10 to 12?
Yeah.
12 on the 24th of October.
Yeah, I should be back by then.
Okay, good. Mike?
Well, I hate to break this to the committee, but the 24th is a really great day because it was my birthday, or is my birthday. And I have some plans that may not include being in the US on the 24th. So I don't think that's going to work for me at all.
Well, you deserve to celebrate, and think of all the hard work you're gonna do leading up to the meeting.
Right. I'll give my full effort up until that weekend, but after that, I can't promise. So
Sandy, in person or Zoom?
I can be on Zoom.
Zoom, okay, great. And Marge, in person or on Zoom?
I would be back in Sarasota, so that would be in person. However, I'm just looking at my calendar and I have a community service ministry meeting also at 10:30 that day.
Yeah, I saw that there was that conflict, and maybe we can get them to juggle their meeting and.
Or at least we'll take you for the first half hour if they can't juggle. Okay.
Well,
so-
and I could probably juggle.
Okay,
In the same position, Marge is in.
okay.
I'll go with them.
All right, well, let us focus with positive thoughts for October 24th that will be together. I'm gonna move us into, if you're okay, I want to get to the meat of the topic today, and this is we're supposed to be making recommendations. And we asked Pastor and Michael if they would participate today, because they live it every day, every week, and we want to make sure that we are aligned with how reality plays out and what your aspirations, make sure we're all on the same page. Okay. So Ernie has once again, actually, you made it simpler, I think, for us to digest. So thank you very well. I thought it was helpful.
Can we make it happen?
Okay, so, yes. No, I can, how many people need a
I
copy?
got mine, it's all marked up.
All right, so I'm going to leave the room.
She sent it out on the agenda.
That's what I thought,
Attach
yeah.
your agenda. I can give you, I can go make a paper copy. Okay, Esther, would you like a paper copy? Pass that right on. I don't need it. Okay, so then I don't. So, okay, we're heading in. Ernie, I'm gonna context setting for us so we can focus.
So first off, a couple of things that have been added that, we had talked about very briefly and haven't really gone deep on is, how do we sequence some of this stuff? And so at the top of the sheet, I've added this notion of what should the phases be? And we had talked about, well, gee, we really don't want them to be years, but as I thought about it, it may just be from a budgetary approval perspective. We may want to presume that each year in the fall, it's time to look at what could be the next year's AV enhancements. So I did a phase 0, which, as we have discussed, is the essential stuff that we got to get cleaned up right now and take care of. And so that's not even, that's immediate. And then phase 1, I'm just saying, let's look at that for 24 based on, affordability and effort. And then 25 and 26. So then I added a phase column in here and I took a stab at, so where do I think we want to put these things? So each of those are things that, I want to make sure everybody looks at and talks about, gee, this looks right or wrong to me. But the big one that I want to go through is the impact column, because I think that's the place to start, because whether it's relatively expensive or relatively inexpensive, it really starts with how much impact is it going to have. So as we go through these, I'd like everybody to take their round at, gee, you said this is an impact 1, hardly any impact, and I think it's going to be huge. So let's talk about that and settle on an impact number, because I think that'll then drive a number of other things.
And just for a reminder, we had thought about 5 areas of focus. So I want to make sure that we're not losing that in the narrative. All right. I don't think I need to repeat that, but we want to stay focused in those 5 areas.
Yeah, because this sheet is partly put together based on physical resources in the facility. But then it also has some other topics like training, which is not tied to any particular, physical asset.
All right, so I'm just so that we're all, there was the in-person worship experience. There's the virtual worship experience. There's the fellowship experience, the hall. There is the tech hygiene. All right, and then there is the educational component, which I did not do those in order. Okay.
I'm sorry, tech hygiene?
Tech hygiene is, who would like to explain tech hygiene? Marge, you're on.
Okay, basically, and I really hate that name, so I've talked to Steve about this already. And I've come up with some other ideas for it, but basically what it is taking everything that we have, documenting it, labeling it, and developing training manuals so that anyone that might have to step in would have a resource, and you're not relying on somebody to try to explain it to you in 5 minutes when you get pulled in from something else.
Yeah, on the spreadsheet, the description calls it AV tech process improvements.
Oh, I see.
The main heading is tech hygiene, because I bring that from my past, when it's just all the best practices of how do you need to run technology effectively so that it's not a short-term thing, but it's an ongoing thing.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And, we've seen lots of examples of that,
1 or 2.
very recently, with even things like, cleaning up cabling, where, somebody throws cables in and it's in and it works. And then you go back and look at it a year later and it's like, what are all these cables and what are they supposed to do?
All right. Any questions for clarity before we get into discussion? Any questions for clarity? Hey.
So I have just a suggestion in terms of structure of the report, especially when we go to the council. When you look at this on page 1, the very first recommendation is the retractable video projection screens in the choir and handbill. And I just don't think that ought to be the first thing people see.
Yeah.
Because
You're gonna scare 'em.
as I've shared with you all, I mean, it's both controversial and important to probably half the congregation. So we got to figure out what to do with it. We talked a lot about that at the last meeting. And I think it was somebody else who suggested that we look at a testing of what we need at the right time. And for example, I don't think we should even look at that until the pipe organ is in. And so we have all the beauty of the pipe organ done, and then we talk about what we do. Because if you do it beforehand, you're just we're gonna create a controversy that's not necessary. And so I would just suggest that somehow in all of our list here, if you want to do sanctuary first, then put that down at number 7 or 8 rather than number 1. That's only just a PR structural issue.
So 2 thoughts on that. I wasn't presuming that this would get distributed.
Oh, okay.
I'm thinking about this as our working document to help us come to conclusions that we then put in a better communicative method. But then number 2 is, I'm totally in agreement with you. I said that shouldn't be thought about until 2026. You know, after the organ is done, then we can think about, do screens fit in someplace? But yes, I'm with you that having that one be first.
So what I'd like as we get into the discussion, let's focus on each section and not in terms of, we are not prioritizing, good point, not so we got it, but what, from the standpoint, it's a keeper, it's not a keeper, or enhance it. And then we can later discuss where it fits priorities and years and things like that. So, Michael and Pastor, we really need you to, are we agreeing about the lights? Are we agreeing about, so do you want to talk about
So
sanctuary?
I'll just add a little narrative to this sanctuary section, if that's okay, which may clean up a little bit. Number 3, adding more PTZ cameras. I don't know how many PTZ cameras we, in an ideal world, task force was thinking about, but because of this lightning strike that happened, one of our PTZ cameras broke. And the way it happens, we can actually buy 2 new PTZ cameras for the cost that it would be to repair the 1 PTZ camera. So we're already going to be adding 1 additional PTZ camera, and we'll have a total of 3 in addition to the other things. So I don't know if you want to keep that on or make it a different priority level. I'm not sure. Microphones above the choir area, we are not going to repair them. They are not good. The microphones that we bought are actually much better, the black ones that are kind of there. And actually they redid them yesterday. And I don't know if in person, it made a big difference in person and made a big difference online. So I think that can just be taken off.
Make sure we optimize the opportunity of progress though. And to Ernie's point about phase 0, I think we have an opportunity with the council, with the congregation, to say what the council, the team has already done even before us. So we want to laud the progress that has already been made. So I think that's something we can include in our narrative of we got a cheaper PS. I don't even know what these things are. So make sure narrative people are capturing things that darn way ahead of the curve that council and team at the church.
Also, number 6, we are working on that right now as part of this new upgrade. We're getting this company to figure out ways that we can network the televisions in the narthex and in Ogram Hall and potentially even in Fellowship Hall to like a unified system where during the day it can just be a constant loop of announcements and everything. And we're working on that bid right now. So that's kind of like phase 0.5.
So, Michael, as we're thinking, because, you know, there's a lot going on in your day-to-day program management, if you could do a quick little narrative of things we have already accomplished that have improved our AV technology capabilities, then Steve would be able to pop that into our phase zeros as we go through all this. And again, why? It affirms the council's visionary, it affirms the staff is on it, and gosh darn, forward momentum, let us continue.
Definitely a positive way to begin flow up, and then what can we do next?
Can I just add one thing on this? And
Yes.
I know that, you know, some of these things that we're talking about right now are needed fixes to help what's going on right now. But I also think part of this camera, microphone, those kinds of issues are more for a long-term look on how do we stream our service better? How do we provide an online experience that's much better than it is? And if that means an improvement to some cameras or changing the way we use microphones in the sanctuary to improve the ability for people to participate and not just watch a, you know, there's been some problems in the past with the Facebook feed and all, you know, my thought is that we would come out of this where an online experience would be really good. And that might mean changing some cameras or changing microphones. So it's not just fixing, you know, that's my point on this, is what I see. So.
Well, and that's our opportunity with the whole, what can we do to improve the virtual experience? So.
The way I was thinking about it, Mike, was phase 0 is just get us back to where we were,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe a little better. And phase 1 is how do we take at least a small step forward? And I'm with you. I think we're, you know, describing this stuff. The same with Fellowship Hall. You know, we're not going to go in saying, here's a bunch of cool stuff we need to put into Fellowship Hall, without talking about, here's what we want to accomplish in Fellowship Hall. So here, that's why we need this cool stuff. You know, same with the sanctuary. We want to really up our virtual experience. So here's what it's going to take to do that.
Getting back to the live streaming, I hope we're still going to work on the program of it, having an introduction into it. We've talked about that instead of just popping on, or an exit, just it's over. And I hope we don't forget to do something like that.
We had it and it got lost between personnel transitions. It will come back when we have a new voice on it and such.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So no, not lost.
Chris?
Kudos though to the new team, whoever they are. Last Sunday, I was not able to be at church, and so I did watch online and was quite impressed. There were already some changes. I don't know if any of you peeked at that, but instead of just the view of our wonderful pastor, just Michael, smack right there in the front, they panned out and you could see the full congregation from more than one angle. All the microphones were strong and firm, except for the one at the pulpit. A couple people online mentioned that. Don't know if they weren't close enough or whatever, but I thought, well, that's just a minor little thing that could be fixed. But there was improvement, and I felt much more as if, okay, I'm watching online. I felt much more part and involved in that service just because of the few minor tweaks that they've already initiated.
What we're discovering, you know, speaking directly to that, is that it's the task of live streaming and operating the mics is just too much for one person. That really it's a minimum two-person job in there. To have someone activating mics and deactivating mics, which not only helps the person speaking be heard, but keeps the sound level of all the other mics in check. You can't just keep them all live and hope for the best. So someone manipulating the sound, muting, unmuting, adjusting levels, that takes a lot of attention. Meanwhile, someone else can operate the cameras. They've also changed the layout of where equipment is, and they've taken everything apart, addressed the cable concerns, and have relayed relaid the layout just to make it more user friendly. And so that was something that we learned. We kind of suspected it, but to have it confirmed and then to have real life confirmation to say, well, maybe you didn't know there were two people, but there were two people that week and they both had distinct jobs and it showed in the product.
Yeah, we used to have switch to this camera now because pastor's going to be speaking and nobody is operating that camera.
Right.
So it was just turn it on, and it would be a static view. Now you're seeing, yeah, it really takes a person to run that camera so you get a more engaging experience.
I think that brings up a good summary, though, of the sanctuary system in general. There are a couple things on here that would be great to add, like some lights for the middle area and things like that. But I think we've invested so many resources in such great equipment over the past 3 years. We have the best equipment that we can possibly have in that sanctuary. I think the problem that we've struggled with is personnel and finding the right person to use the equipment to the best capability, because we found now that we bring in this professional company and, you know, keep a caveat that they're trying to repair and diagnose at the same time as doing. But when they've come in now, just as Chris was bringing up, we see these really new cool camera angles and from fewer cameras, actually, because there were only 2 cameras working that Sunday. So I think, I don't know if this is a task force thing or not, but the correct professional staffing of the AV department is the critical piece here.
Well, and that, as you're sharing what we're doing to get through zero, you'll say things like that, and we'll say things like that. Okay, I mean, and the we and the you is the same one, but we totally agree that our recommendation is to make sure that we have everything properly staffed. And that's why the tech hygiene is also important in there. Okay,
yep.
So
Have you ever asked the tech company, do they know of anybody that would be good for the job?
They may be the job.
Oh, they may be the job. Hey, there you go.
We'll see how it goes.
I'm gonna keep moving us along. So in the sanctuary, is there anything else for conversation before we have the surveys analyzed? Okay, anything else from what Ernie has here?
Particularly on impact, do you think there's any 4 or 5 level impacts that we haven't identified, or do you think there's a 4 or 5 impact that is overstated?
Oh, to be honest with you, I think the screens, tablets, whatever, I think it has a higher impact than 5. I honestly do. For the people who wanted it, it is a 1.
Oh, 5 is the most.
5 is the most?
Yeah,
Oh, I thought 5 is the worst.
No.
Okay. All right, well.
Steve, to your tablets and screens, I think they can be positioned. This isn't a now because there's so many other things going on, but it behooves us to keep them on the radar screen. Yeah. Okay, for future. We have to remember, if we're not, we are about what's ahead. And it would not, it'd be malfeasance if we didn't mention things that we have learned and observed, especially through our What's Cool survey input that has come to us. So we need to make sure we're paying attention. I want to go back to anything else, either with the sanctuary for in-person or virtual, that other people want to make sure make the narrative recommendations.
The only thing I would say is I'm not sure I agree with the highest impact for screens in the sanctuary as being higher than the impact of the screens. I know I'm moving to a different section, but the screens in Fellowship Hall. If the church has the resources, Fellowship Hall is where I see those being more immediately effective. Just based on the way we're using Fellowship Hall already. That's where we really need them. So that would be my only comment.
might be a good point. Start there. And people see how great they are and how they're useful, then the sanctuary might not be as like, no.
I'm not saying no, I'm just saying
Yeah.
if
Yeah,
we're talking
no,
about time,
There's a lot of people.
we
that
could
are
really
saying
use them
no
now.
for
There.
those screens. Nobody's. It's no.
So can I move us out of in-person in worship, in virtual use of sanctuary to the fellowship?
I was trying to say.
Well, and actually, I think there was high passion of fellowship hall. So that I think there's high passion among the AV task force about whatever should happen. So Michael, how about if we take a stab this way? Take us to what's already underway to get us to phase 0 in fellowship hall.
Before the lightning strike.
Before the lightning strike.
What's in phase 0 to get us where we need to
Well,
function.
so you all took part in the walkthrough with Pastor Ken and Ernie of what exists in the church. We do have a very primitive sound system, which nobody's quite sure about the date of it, but we think it's back in the 70s or whatnot. It's just not functioning correctly. Speakers are blown, the soundboard, there's certain things that work that don't work. It just needs to, essentially there is nothing. For all intents and purposes, there's nothing. We are starting to use the hall both for church programs, but also we're starting to rent it out to community groups, other churches who are coming in for various events. And, you know, after the refresh, it looks amazing and people just love the space. And so we really want to try to make it a more usable space in multiple ways. So based on the, I don't know who counsel something, we started getting quotes for what a new sound, video, streaming, sound, video, and streaming system would be in that space. That has gotten a little held up now with lightning strikes and other priorities coming up, but we're waiting to hear back from at least the first company for that proposal. And then once we get that, we'll work with the second and third company because we obviously want to get multiple quotes for the size of the project that will be.
And we had a proposal from Focus Technology back in the refresh project phase, where they came up with a sort of a dream of how that would look.
We keep forgetting we have folks on
Yeah,
the screen,
look that
so don't
way.
look at us.
Yes.
Look at them so they can hear.
Well, you
Okay.
folks had my better side.
I miss the owl.
Yeah. So if you go back a couple of years when we started that refresh project, there was a proposal for AV in the fellowship hall. And it simply ended up being cost prohibitive, and we focused, no pun intended, a little more on Ogram. But the hope was that in fellowship hall, there would be a sort of integrated system where you had the congregation had access to a panel that would allow you to plug in mics, to use cordless mics, that when a band came in, because you can remember back at that point, we were doing some of those dinners, so dinner and music and good fellowship, you know, a visiting band or a group or a musician could plug into our system without having to bring theirs, so that it would be a nice sound through the whole of fellowship hall, rather than having a bank of speakers on stage. And if you happen to be in the front 10 rows, you know, you were bleeding out your ear. If you happened to be closer to the kitchen, you couldn't hear the music. So it was a system that you could plug into just to have a microphone all the way up to, you know, a multi-instrument band doing it. And then also to have some capability of someone sitting with a tablet and mixing the sound with the tablet, so you didn't need to be in a separate room. It was a lovely proposal. Those were some of the dreams for fellowship hall. And at that point, we were thinking more, well, gosh, if we had this, what could we do? And now, as Michael's describing, we don't have it, but we've got people who are saying, boy, imagine what we could do if we had this.
Steve?
I just want to plead with both of you on behalf of Mike, Sandy, and myself who are on the foundation board. If you can get some kind of a proposal before our September meeting, I think there's real merit, because as you both are aware, in the conversations between the council and the foundation, there's been a real push that the foundation needs to do something big and positive for the church that's visible. And this is clearly on the table. And so if we can get some kind of a proposal before that meeting, I can't guarantee we're gonna do it that day, but I don't want to miss the opportunity if it surfaces.
What's the date of that meeting? Do you remember?
Well,
Thursday.
what?
This Thursday?
Thursday.
Oh,
Oh, wow.
Thursday, yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, I would just say, 2 weeks ago, I would have done that in 2 seconds. But now with the strike, the lightning strike, and the various other things we have, I'm not sure. There's a lot of things that we may need help with, AV wise. So, but if you guys tell me, then
No, I hear you, but I can tell you from the foundation perspective, it has to be something visible. If it's just maintenance for which the foundation doesn't get any credit, then they're not gonna do it.
Gotcha.
I mean, so we need to find something visible that everybody will say, wow, that's what the foundation did. Otherwise, you're not gonna get them to do it.
Gotcha.
Well, in the strategy with the task force, the council, the congregation, it's another, if the foundation were to meet and were to approve something, that's another added team that would be visible in the AV task force. Gosh sakes,
Right.
this is exciting.
Mhm.
So are you saying you don't have any time to put a proposal in, just so we
Oh.
can be sure on how?
No, it's Pastor Ken.
We know roughly what we need. Focus a year and a half ago gave us a glimpse of what's possible
Sound wise.
and Van Technology, who are the folks that are in the sound booth in the sanctuary, we had brought them in, Michael had brought them in to start giving a quote for Fellowship Hall, and they happened to be here when we needed them. I don't know how quickly they can move.
I will
Just,
investigate.
just a thought there. I mean, I think it would be acceptable, and Steve, you tell me if I'm wrong. I think going to the foundation with a range, and it might be a $20,000 or $30,000 range of what might be needed, could start discussions in September to be approved or considered in December. Because you're not going to start this project that quickly. And if we're going to spend that kind of money, I would like us to be very, very careful about the estimates.
Right, and not having the foundation approve a specific estimate.
Right.
We just say, you know, just to make up numbers, we're gonna need $100,000. And, you know, we want to request 50,000 of that come from the foundation. And we'll find the rest somewhere else. But so is the foundation ready to approve $50,000 for upgrading Fellowship Hall?
My perspective is we've gotten ourselves in trouble AV wise from time to time by putting something in quick or doing something quick. Have it. And I think if we're going to invest this money in the hall, let's do it very thoughtfully, very carefully, and plan it out.
So what am I doing?
I just my 2 cents.
I mean, if you have any information that you could bring to the foundation board meeting on Thursday afternoon, I think that would be helpful. Right? I'm looking at Mike and Sandy.
I would agree with that, and I'm not so concerned about, let's have the exact proposal. But I think one of the things that the foundation is looking for, now I've got my foundation hat on, would be indication of this is what we're going to want in the future. And that makes it so much easier on the foundation to act quickly if we need to act in December, or if it's in January, we need to act. If we know what's coming, that makes it easier for us. So
You're kind of staging it for them on Thursday.
It'll be state.
And I think the focus for the foundation has got to be on how does that help build capacity by, leveraging Fellowship Hall? Because that's going to be the criteria they're going to want to look at is, not how is this business as usual? It's how does this help us build capacity for the future?
Think they,
All right, I'm gonna keep us moving because we've got a few hard stops at 11. Okay, so Michael, regarding what's here, is there anything in the Fellowship Hall discussion that you're going, please, no, we don't want any of that?
No, everything there is essentially, unless Pastor, that's all what we've been
That's what you're
asking.
already,
Yes.
Yeah.
you're are working and need. Right? I just want to make sure the narrative team understands it. Okay, we're now moving on to Ogram Hall. All right. So is there anything you're doing to get us to ground zero or phase zero that you want to share
Pastor.
already in Ogram Hall?
Yes, so Ogram Hall was also part of the lightning strike. We're discovering that it had a detrimental effect on those cameras that we'd cannibalized from the sanctuary. We haven't got to this point yet, but I can imagine us very shortly costing putting TPZ cameras into Ogram, because we had really hoped that the cannibalized cameras would get us a start, but they're now proving to be so unstable that I think we're going to be in that tilt pan zoom kind of camera level pretty soon. Sound wise, the sound works well. There's a couple of things that blew in the sound booth, in the Ogram Hall sound booth. They've been replaced. We've got a professional person doing in there what the folks did in the sound booth in the sanctuary just this past week, which is to take all the wiring, simplify it, label it, so the hygiene, the AV hygiene is in hand or in process in Ogram. We're just trying to make Ogram feel a little nicer. The Fellowship Hall is such a pleasure to be in. It's warm, it's inviting. Comfortable might be pushing it, but we love that space. Ogram still, to some of the folks that are using it, feels a little too cold, a little too utilitarian. The artwork on the walls has helped, but we have to work on what are the folks seeing at home. They're really seeing the business end, the non-pretty end of Ogram, which is a shame because there is a prettier end now. So that we've been going in stop start, 1 step forward, 3 steps back with Ogram. It still hasn't worked as advertised. In part because of equipment, in part because of the person operating the equipment, in part because of the lightning strike, in no small part because of the lightning strike. But we're persevering because it still has that potential to just catch fire as a place to be.
Bad use
in
of
person.
words.
Yes. Oy vey. That's probably a good sign for me to be quiet. So we're getting there.
So that is what we have to do because of circumstances that have been handed us. Okay, so that's we're working on this. As we think forward in the ideas that are on here, are those already incorporated in the getting us where we need to be? Or are the future things that we want to give the council a heads up on? And these are also important for Ogram Hall from an AV tech standpoint.
All of these are, there's nothing on this list that hasn't been part of the conversation
Of what you're doing
of
now.
what we're doing now.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair.
thing that we had in our hall before was comfortable furniture for certain meetings. That was always nice, like,
The sofas and the thing.
yeah. It softened it, and there was a different atmosphere you could change it into. I'm saying, don't go soft. something that you can do, move it around that it does look soft, but it's also service too. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Maybe it takes an interior decor, somebody that's in professional meeting type rooms, not a home decorator. But that was for Stephen Ministers. It was always much nicer to have couches rather than.
It worked well for that. It worked well for AA. They loved that.
Yes.
The combination of an area rug, sofas, armchairs, and the bookcases. The character of Oldham changed very dramatically.
Yeah.
And now it's purposefully meant to have the capability of moving everything out of it. So it's just a blank slate, and whichever group uses it has seminar tables and much more comfortable chairs to lay out, per the building use form, what really works for them. But it's just, it needs some kind of softening, but it's a work in progress.
So I want to focus for the AV task force perspective. Does anyone have any additional, because it sounds like the Ogram Hall section is getting us to phase 0. So far I'm having a fun with this because we're going to have everything done before we go to the council on October 24th, which I applaud everyone for doing so well, but then why did we exist? Okay, so, but I'm okay with that.
The only thing that's not on here is, I don't know if it matters, but this whole idea of having televisions throughout the campus, streaming these announcements, that would be in Ogram Hall too. I don't know whether it would be the television that's in there or a new one by the door or something like that, but that's part of it as well.
Okay, right.
Yeah, and I think we might be interpreting this differently. C1 and C2 are both going to cost money, and they are new enhancements. They're not phase 0. They're not bringing us back to where we were. They're moving us forward. So.
But they have funding. Am I confused?
No, there's no.
Pardon me, I'm confused. Okay.
Yeah, because the only thing we're doing emergency funding for is essentially to bring us back where we were.
In the sanctuary.
No, we're on.
Oh.
Is what I'm interpreting the council as saying, if it got broke and it's needs to be fixed now, we got to go fix it.
Yeah, I want to second what he said. The motion was such sums as necessary. We need, there was a sense of the council that we need to empower you all to do what you need to do to bring it back to 0. How's that?
In any area, you're saying.
Well, programmatically, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that would not put a speaker system in fellowship hall because that didn't exist before the lightning strike. But it would certainly solve the issues with Ogram. I mean, are you live streaming tonight or no?
No, the class is done.
Yeah.
It's done.
The class is done. Yeah.
So did you have a class last Monday? Because none of us could get on.
We had a class last Monday and people came online. Yeah.
No, Doug Ingebrigtsen couldn't get on. I couldn't get on.
Really?
That's odd. Yeah, people were on. Lois was on.
Okay.
No.
We don't need to
Yeah,
discuss
no,
that.
Is it in the archives? Can we know?
No, it's not, 'cause I tried to watch it. It's not.
I haven't looked. I sent it last Monday night. I sent the video file to Ben.
Don't worry about it.
I'll find it. Please.
So those who are crafting narratives knows what's a phase 0 and a phase 1. Is that correct? Good.
Phase 1 is a year ahead. Phase 0.
It's where, okay, so all right. I'm moving on to the main conference room.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When we're talking about all these TVs and how they're interconnected, I'm assuming that if anything is streamed within the building, that all of these TVs would have that capability. So if there's a service and for somehow I got relegated to the fellowship hall because I was bad, I would be able to see the service from a TV in fellowship hall, correct?
Way that they're talking about it is building basically a 2-channel system where one channel for each unit or each television goes to whatever the internal camera system is. And the second channel is this announcement streaming kind of thing. And you can actually activate each unit, each television separately. So you can put everything on one channel, or you can say the service will be on in fellowship hall, but then the announcements are streaming back in Ogram Hall. You can
Okay.
switch out. So I think yes is the answer.
Okay, I could see like down the road, if we have large participation and there are people that are coming to the church and they need to be sitting somewhere else, they could still catch the service, right? They could still,
Yep.
even though they're on property, because I'm anticipating we'll have larger numbers, and I'm just looking towards the future.
Right.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, the only distinction with fellowship hall is that there's not a permanent TV in there. So we'd have to roll one of the portable ones in there to use that, whereas the conference rooms are already set up with TVs and are ready to go once this gets installed.
Right.
Well, that's where I see TVs, a good way to introduce TVs to the masses would be at fellowship hall, to see how effective they are and how they're used. Because, some people that are not involved in technology are not going to envision that. They're just going to see it as an albatross. It's, something that's going to make things look a little ugly sitting on the side of the wall. So I think the fellowship is a great place to show the capabilities and what it can do as far as delivering content, delivering, service and so forth.
And that takes us, I think it takes us a little bit into the main conference room. Again, phase 0 versus future phases here.
But the one thing I would add here, which we are adding in Ogram Hall, is the self-serve kiosk to enable starting Zoom meetings without help from church staff. We certainly could use that in the main conference room as well, because you, Pastor Nina, one of you have to be there in order to engage Zoom right now for the people that are around that table. So it's beneficial to have that. Well, it is.
It's there under the main conference room.
Under D2.
Service. Then correct.
No, I'm with you. I agree.
Yeah.
It should
You agree,
be
we're
in
gonna-
both.
Get it in there.
And so far, it's, you guys are in most of the meetings that are gonna be Zoom from there. But we need to move to the point where you're not required to be in every meeting that's there.
That could be fall under more of the training mode though, because essentially that owl is as simple as it's going to get for lay people to be able to plug in a computer and start a Zoom meeting. I don't know if it's going to get all that. I don't know if you agree.
I do. I was thinking the same thing. It's going to be training. At the moment, all you have to do is one adapter, one little USB-C into a USB-C, and if you switch it on and power it up, you're done. So technology-wise, equipment-wise, that's as simple as it's ever going to get. It's the training. It's how is someone to know that that's what you plug in there, and that the setting has to be changed to this and this, and that becomes training, or a little laminated card.
See, I'm on a different page. I'm not, what I'm trying to describe with this self-service kiosk is there's nothing to bring in. It's a dedicated laptop or Chromebook or whatever it is that's there that has a big card on it that says, press here to start the Zoom meeting. No plug it in and teach people and all that stuff. It's just self-service. Go.
Permanent hardware.
Which is possible. You'd still have to teach somebody how to start the laptop, how to do this. And then there's also the element of if an outside group comes in and wants something specific displayed on the television or whatnot, Like the resident association or so, they bring in their computer, they want a slideshow. There's always going to be an element that's not going to be able to prepped for in a one-stop shop. But yes, it could be simpler if there was already a laptop dedicated there, locked up.
Oh, and then assuming that the person that then is going to run it is comfortable with whatever laptop we've got. If they're
Right.
a PC person, it's a Mac. If they're Mac people, it's a PC. I get you. I'm just not sure it's going to be that simple.
I can tell you from personal experience, I've been to, because I did a lot of training throughout the United States, and I've been in a gazillion administrative offices doing training. And I'll tell you from personal experience that I always found it much more comfortable if I was able to bring my laptop in that I know very well, and I know my PowerPoint is set up and it's structured, and I could just plug in and I'm off and running. I absolutely did not like when I had to go in and then take a USB and move my PowerPoint into their laptop, because one, we might not be on the same platform, which happens, especially at schools. Or when I take my PowerPoint, maybe I have an older version than what they have. And then when I put my PowerPoint presentation, next thing you know, things are wonky and are all over the place. So I think the way to look at it, and this is just my personal opinion, is that you want to make it so it's plug and play, so that literally I can take my laptop, plug it in, and then everything is just, perfect. Instead of I never liked using somebody else's laptop because you just don't know. And people, especially now, you got Chromebooks, you got MacBooks, I mean, you got so many variations. So I would be careful of thinking it's going to be that simple.
See, I want it all. You bring your machine, you would plug in, you'd be great.
Yeah.
When Jane goes there and Jane needs to start a meeting, she wants to just hit the go button.
Yeah.
Not plug anything in. And when exercise class is starting in Oklahoma, the exercise people want to go in and hit the go button.
Yeah.
So it's got to do both. It can't be a lockdown so that this is the only way you Zoom, but it's got, we got too much potential for remote participation that we are dependent on people having the right equipment and knowing how to use it.
Yeah.
So it's a small thing.
Well,
It's not even
actually,
fair.
it's all part of the narrative. Okay, because we don't have cost proposals. We don't have specific vendors. We have, this is what we're trying to accomplish.
Right.
And I think we explain, we are recommending, this is what we're trying to accomplish, whether you're a techie or whether you're a wizard or a muggle. So we, okay, whichever you are.
And the idea behind it is solid. I mean, we want more people to be able to help themselves with technology, and we want to move towards being able to offer hybrid experiences as much as we can, and that's important. So, yes.
That's the theme.
Right.
To go in to the council. All right.
Well, I just wondered about that owl. Would it be then, would it behoove us to have more?
Yes, because part of what we discover is that unless multiple rooms are fully equipped, we simply rob Peter to pay Paul. And that's not good, carrying equipment from one end of the building to the other, klutz like me. And it also means that you're disconnecting something that really is just plug and play. And now, unless you're very attentive to putting it back just as you found it, the next group has to start plugging everything into adapters again. So yeah, I think it came up here, the room of Ogram, the idea of did I read that? Yeah, and I think that owl is proving itself. I mean, 1100, 1200.
Outrageous.
In the scheme of things.
It's also going to be as close as we're going to get in this iteration to plug and play, because it's the camera, the speaker, and the microphone. That's your one in. And as long as you've got Zoom set to the owl, you're up and running.
Yeah.
That's as close as you're going to get.
When I look at the remaining things, we have tech hygiene, tech training, site hearing, and tech organizing for success. I think at this juncture, I'd like us to pause because we have to wait for the input from the congregation. Okay, these are all things that sound good to us and we should think about them, but let's wait and see what Lad, Mike, and Sandy come up with. So that we can be fully informed, and it'll be more darn fun that people in the congregation will see that their input was listened to as we go. Michael, you have a point you'd like to make on that?
I do.
I thought you did. No, I thought I saw
We did,
it go
no.
up. And down. All right. Because be it that we would ever have a time where there were not new assignments being handed out. So I'm gonna go back to, we've got 3 working on analysis. Steve will continue to be thinking narrative in concert with Michael, who's getting us to phase 0, and Ernie, who's taking us beyond phase 0, okay? But I would like us to think about, as a task force, our opportunity to communicate how the church is already embracing technology. And I think that there are ways for us to do that, not only through Marge's communication, maybe in connections, there could be nuggets communicating what is happening already, either because of lightning strikes or whatever it is. So there could be ways that. I also think that when we get closer to October, how fun it could be to have another video that really does talk about the improvements that the council foundation staff have already undertaken, so people can see and feel technology a little bit. And I'm wondering who the team would be, Chris and Marge, to be thinking about a communication of what's happening at the church. How do we feel about Chris and Marge just putting their noodles together to talk about how do we communicate what's going on so people can know the church is investing in their future already, but also what might be ahead? Could we ask Chris and Marge to work together on a communications plan for that?
It's a good Rogers and Hammerstein kind of team, like it.
Oh, I like that, Michael. I'd be happy to work with Chris on it.
Yeah, you work with Marge.
Well, I didn't want the 2 of you to feel left out as we were analyzed.
Not to worry. I do have a,
Oh, Mark goes.
Marge, okay, who's first? Marge will go first, then
Yeah.
Jane. Marge first.
okay, so I just do have a quick question because I've been doing these weekly updates in connections in the bulletin. What should the focus be now? Is the survey closed, or is it still open for people, or do we move on now to what our next steps are? I guess I'm not sure.
The survey's closed, but I think it's a celebratory moment. I think this, Marge, you have a superb opportunity to take Sandy's count and say, oh my goodness, we heard from more than 100 of you about helping us do our work. So I think you have a, does anyone disagree with the celebratory moment of thank you for telling us? So how's that feel, Marge?
That's kind of what I was thinking, but I just wanted to hear that from the group.
Okay, anybody, or you have a little wrinkled brow, Ernie?
I guess we've got to set some expectation for when are they gonna hear
Yes.
the results of what they all put in. You know, not a firm commitment, but just something, thanks a lot, and here's what we're doing with it, and here's when you're gonna hear.
And we're working towards an October report, because we can't say the date. Okay,
Yeah,
we're working
that's good.
towards an October report. Is that okay?
Yes.
How's that feel? Okay.
That's good. I've been kind of alluding to that kind of all along. Eventually, you know, our work is going to, accumulate and end in October. And so that fits well into what we've been saying.
Now I'm gonna go to Wade. Sandy has something, but they, wait,
You're on
Jane has something, Sandy, but Sandy has the time sensitive.
I have a hard stop by.
It was Sandy, thank you very much. Okay, we'll keep you posted, and then over to Jane.
Question about lightning rod. There used to be one up at the church.
We're
Is
working on it.
Still there?
It's there and it's being, Tom is working on getting some additional protection.
Because the older people remember that.
Yep.
What happened to
Working
that?
with the same guy that put it on.
It is there and functional.
It is functional.
Yeah, think about it as fire protection.
Fire, that's it.
That's what I think ours
Yeah.
initially was get the lightning to the ground instead of into your building and in
Yeah.
flames. So it protected us from fire, but
Fire.
it didn't protect all of our electrical equipment.
Okay, so
Working on it.
we're working on it. Okay. 'Cause people keep-
And I think, did Steve or Ernie have his, who get their hand up? Anybody got a hand up? Anybody
Put your
got-
hands down, everybody.
On your knees.
Okay, so let's see, look at agenda. So, our next meeting, which I do not have in front of me, but I did.
September
put it-
18th.
September,
What's the additional one that you added?
yes, because we need to keep moving. So,
September 18th?
yes, so I'm thinking
3:15.
the 18th, yes, okay. And I'm thinking it, go ahead,
What time? 3:15,
3:50.
4:45.
I'm trying to sneak in, because we always go longer than an hour. So I'm trying to give us a little extra time. So that'll be here. Zoom is available for anyone who cannot be here. I'll put an agenda together for that since it's only next week. Okay. So I think we should be good. Anybody, I'm looking up at the screen, Mike, Lad, or Marge, anything else for the team right now?
I would like to thank Lad for taking over this. You wouldn't have the report if I were doing it for about a month, just for figuring out how to do a spreadsheet. So thank you for compiling
Okay.
that.
So good teamwork. Anything in our room here that people would like to talk about at this time? All right, it's a delight. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, the in-person meetings are turning out to be at times where you don't get a donut or lunch.
No, that's
So,
Does anything happen at 3:15?